is so lonely being with a narcissist. I remember the last and final one that moved in with me that finally got me to get serious with my healing. With him, I figured that I hadn't lived with anyone for so many years where I had chosen to live alone that this time I would try it. The men that I did date during those years were not abusive at all. Matter of fact, all that I have dated still remain good friends today with me. By the time this guy came along though, I was wanting to experience the experience of living with someone. And the other factor was that I was ill, without knowing what it was that I was ill from. I was down to 85 pounds and I was passing out quite often. So this forced me to have to shut down my practice as I tried to figure out what was happening and how to heal. And to boot, family members walked out on me with accusations from some that I was on drugs, which I was not. So between being ill, not knowing what was wrong with me, and family walking out when I needed them the most, I felt hurt, I felt lost, I was afraid, and I was alone. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, and I would get diagnosed with one thing, and then I went for a second opinion with a new diagnosis being handed over to me. So with all of this going on, I decided to leave the country. I had decided that the solution to at least one issue, which was family, was to move as far away so as to never encounter them again. So I picked Australia. Somehow I thought that distance would ease the pain. So I looked to social media to meet all kinds of people from that country. And as luck would have it, I met Peter. And within no time, we were engaged to be married, and all I had to do next was to sell my house, and goodbye painful world, and hello to new non-judgmental world. Unfortunately though, or perhaps today I should say fortunately, it was one of the worst times to sell real estate because that year we had entered a huge recession. So discouraged, one day I ended up throwing my arms up in the air and I said to God, don't send me what I want, send me what I need. And oh boy, did God answer quickly on that one. Within days, I met this narcissist who immediately started emailing me, and from his emails appeared to be quite interesting. He seemed to be an interesting character. So the dating happened within weeks, and so was his moving in. I mentioned to him once that I was looking to rent some space in my home due to having to close down my business so that I could take some time to heal. So with what seemingly made sense as to why he would want to move in with me when he already had his own place, he moved in. The story was that he had been down on his luck and had recently been forced to move into an apartment with no vehicle left for untold reasons. But he had shown me the house that he had been in for the last 7 years, along with the long-term prestigious job he had had before life had bitten him somehow. But on the very night that he moved in, he spent it on my computer in my office. He seemed so happy to have access to a computer. All he had was this BlackBerry phone, so I was happy for him, even though it never dawned on me that for a guy who had this big house, moved in with merely boxes, guitars, and amps, where was his computer and where was his furniture? But anyway, you'd think that a new couple starting this new life together would be at least celebrating day one. But the very first night, I found myself going to bed alone, waiting for him to come to bed that night until eventually I fell asleep. And that went on night after night. He would go to work using my SUV, come home, go straight to bed, sleep until dinner, which I would make, eat, and return to my office on my computer for the remainder of the night. And the weekends were pretty much the same, with being online, naps, and playing his guitar. And then I used to chalk it up to, he's just a quiet person and he likes to keep to himself. It's funny how we can rationalize, huh? He would also go for strolls, but he never invited me to walk with him. And finally, after a couple of months of this, I know I'm slow, I started bargaining with him. I asked him if we could go for walks after dinners at night, but his response was that his feet hurt. So after being told this time and time again, I finally asked him why he went for walks if his feet hurt, and if they didn't in those moments, then why didn't he invite me to go with him? And his response was, to get away from you. And he said it so nonchalantly. The thing is that when we grow up unacknowledged, we learn that everyone is more important than we are. And to add another layer, we have this incredible amount of compassion that some say derives from feeling rejected and hurt, and we just don't want anyone else to feel any kind of pain no matter what. But I don't know, I mean, yes, for sure we don't want others feeling this pain, but I'm not so sure it stems from learned behavior. I think this kind of compassion is who we are coming forth into this world. Anyway, back to what I was saying. With this compassionate side of ours and wanting others to never feel unhappy, we became these super understanding people. So I understood his need for wanting to take his walks alone. It was his downtime, and I got that. But the only thing is, in all of this, is that there was no balance. I had wants and needs too, and he could have gone for walks sometimes by himself and other times with me. And you know, I used to tell people how it was nothing for me to stand up for anyone that I loved with no issue at all. But when it came time to defending and fighting for me, I held it in and I swam in resentment. I just bottled it all up inside. And eventually, I tried more bargaining with him. I tried, could we have a cup of tea together after dinner while sitting on the French porch and watch others take walks? See, the very thing that I really wanted. Walks for me were and still are everything. It's one of those things that I value most in relationships. Not restaurants, not barbecues, not parties, not theaters, but walks. Values are the things that we need in life in order to feel fulfilled. Values are the specific things that each individual needs for peace, joy, and for love. And when we don't understand that, we don't have boundaries. We allow others to deny us what we value, where in reality we are denying it from our own self. Anyway, the last thing that I tried bargaining, since having an after dinner tea with him was also a no, was that once a week on a Saturday night for 2 hours could he play his guitar in the living room rather than locked up in my office. I didn't even care that he didn't talk to me, just play. Just so I could have 2 hours a week of not being alone. I mean, that isn't even half of a cookie crumb. The last straw was the beatdowns to my humanness that even I said no to at this point was when I told him that I was going to the grocery store. He looked at me and he said, yeah, but I was gonna go. How about I go first and then you can go? Remember, this guy is using my vehicle. So at this point I realized how not a couple we were. Can't even go to the grocery store together. So I called him on it. And I suggested that we go together as common sense. So he paused, processed for a second, then said, yeah, okay, makes sense. And then he turned around and said, so what are you going to do for me? I was so floored, my brain couldn't come up with anything to say. But to him, he was doing me a favor, and so now I owed him one. Anyway, I did put an end to the relationship at that point and told him that he could stay on as a renter. Sadly, though, that was just the beginning of the nightmare of what it is to feel alone. My diagnosis finally came in as to what it was that was wrong with me, which was late-stage Lyme disease. And this was to be his newfound supply and complete control over me, where I completely gave over my independence. He knew all about Lyme disease, so for me, as much as it was a hardship having him in my life, it was also a blessing in disguise because he not only knew about Lyme disease, but also knew how to keep it under control and heal the parts that could be healed without being drugged up by doctors with 1,000 prescriptions that turn you into a zombie. This was a protocol that, although entailed only one simple medication, the life change and the physical pain that would need to be endured was a whole other thing. It would entail all the issues coming up to be healed in a long and painful manner. And if I thought I felt ill then, starting the journey meant getting even more ill before getting better. In this protocol, it wasn't weeks or months to heal. I was looking at years here, where I would have what we call the good days and the bad days, because issues would come up from different areas of the body at different times. They would come up to heal. And it felt as though in those times that you were going to die when they came up. And this would take place until all that could be healed was healed. And you couldn't go to the doctors on emergencies either, because they would pump you up with things to increase your vitamin D levels. This had a lot to do with vitamin D. I'm not going to get into that, but anyway. And if they did that, that could potentially kill you. So I was in a pickle. My first bad day after starting this protocol was 9 months in bed, literally. And I thank God that he was there for me. Perhaps not a good boyfriend, but a good person, because every time I went through more scary body traumas, he sat by my side and explained to me what was happening and made me feel safe. So that first year, he became my life support. And although he was there during my scary episode, it still remained that I was completely alone as he continued being online night after night. What a great way to trauma bond someone, right? Because what I finally understood after years of research and classes regarding narcissism was that he was getting supply caring for me that way. Being so knowledgeable, I looked up to him. I counted on him. In his mind, he was a doctor. I believe that's what he believed. I trusted him and I gave him complete control. And I also let everyone know how knowledgeable he was once I saw results and was out of bed. I mean, all of this was good for me, of course. And to this day, I count my blessings for this. But for him, it didn't stem out of love for another human. It was all about supply. So after my 9-month bed experience, I started getting up more. At first, a couple hours a day, and then more. And in between, there were more scary episodes. And this is all in the span of years here, but it was all part of the healing journey. Eventually, though, I was able to be well enough to get out, so I started taking stained glass classes, and that's when I saw the real self appear. Here, all the control over me took over. Having huge fits and yelling at me. I couldn't go out because I was sick, and calling me names if I did. And then if I stayed up later than 9 o'clock, again, another fit that would turn into name calling and breaking my things. And this nice but weird person that had taken care of me had now turned into this complete control freak. And now I'm seeing what's happening with 20/20 vision. All the years that followed, because I was still healing, I kept studying up on this newfound knowledge regarding narcissism and taking courses on everything that I could find on narcissism and codependency. Healing my codependency, once I understood how I had attracted him, became an obsession. In the meantime, I still had to survive between needing him, being stuck with him, and walking on eggshells. And by then, he had found more ways to isolate me, including taking away my best friends through triangulation. I had become his servant, and in his mind, I owed him my life, which entailed my house and my vehicles. Years later, and he was still taking my vehicles, leaving me on foot, more isolation. So I cooked, I cleaned, I served, and that in itself became a whole situation, because now we were behaving as a couple, although there wasn't anything physical. But in his mind, he owned me. And in mine, I was just trying to survive the chaos. But in all of this, the loneliness became unbearable. I was stuck in a house with nowhere to go and no one to see, and still too ill to work. He was the only person that I could talk to, but he left me completely alone, because by then I was merely a servant as per supply. He had found supply elsewhere from a few other sources and was now getting lots. So it was cook, feed him, supply a vehicle, and a nice house that he looked good in, and someone he could yell at and attack every time he didn't get his supply elsewhere. And then when my mother died, I really couldn't be alone, and I told him so. But up to the loft he went, leaving me alone all day, day after day, and night after night, to deal with this by myself. And I wasn't just alone in the way of spending all my time alone, but alone in the way of support. I was doing all the heavy lifting, as sick as I was. I was mowing the lawn. I was cleaning the garage that he was constantly tearing apart. I was responsible for all the hard work as he played on his computer, waiting for dinner. Meanwhile, he claimed that he owned my house. If I tried to drive my own vehicles, it was a fit, or he would arrange to break them down so that I couldn't drive them. If I asked to go with him, such as to church, for example, I was told to stay home and watch the house. Stay home and watch the house was a phrase that was constant with him. as he went out to socialize. And it's funny how, although we think that we're alone during the relationships that we're in with these characters, we don't realize the depth of how alone we are long after the relationship is over, sometimes years. And that's if we do the work. So for all of you guys out there, I know what you're going through. I know what it feels like to be by yourself like this. And all I can say is just keep going. Do not despair. Keep studying up on narcissism, because it empowers you when you see that others are going through this stuff. And keep working on self. Where there's a will, there's a way. And you will get there. If you want out of these relationships, you will get there. And that's all I have to say for today. And on that note, I bid you farewell, and we shall see you all in the next video. Bye for now.